5 reasons just doesn't add up for Shohei Ohtani. Plus, the one question that answers whether or not we should care. The question is, was he betting on baseball? It's the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, the Fox News YouTube channel, the Fox News Facebook page, which you can subscribe to the Will Cain Show on YouTube. It's right under this video, under this live stream. There's a button you can hit subscribe to the Will Cain Show. Shohei Ohtani of the Los Angeles Dodgers is not only the best player in Major League Baseball, he's the best player in the world, and for many, already deservingly in the discussion of will he be one of the best baseball players of all time. He's a really, really, really good, possibly great pitcher, and he is a great hitter, one of the few players to actually do both in professional baseball. He just signed an incredibly long and lucrative deal with the Los Angeles Dodgers. And although he's been in the United States for 7 years, he doesn't speak English. He has had a long-term interpreter, Ippei Matsuhara. Now, just about a week ago, in investigating an illegal gambling bookmaker in California, where gambling remains illegal, Ippei Matsuhara and Shohei Ohtani came up in the ledgers. Apparently, $4.5 million had been paid to this bookmaker, Matthew Boyer, from Shohei Ohtani. $4.5 million, quite a bit of money. German reports the number could go much higher. And it just has stunk from the beginning. The story doesn't add up. And I'm going to walk through it. Shohei Ohtani gave a press conference yesterday and laid all the blame on his interpreter. He said that his interpreter, Ippei, who was his best friend, his driver, who he played pitch and catch with in warm-ups during games, who was by his side 365 days a year, was stealing money from him to pay off his own gambling debts. Ohtani had no knowledge and nothing to do with this debt to a bookmaker. Now, right now, Pete Rose is out there. You actually put out a video and go, I wish I'd thought about that. I wish I had an interpreter in the 70s and 80s. But, Dodgers fans want to believe Shohei Ohtani. A lot of baseball fans who want to believe in greatness want to believe Shohei Ohtani. But it's hard to believe Ohtani for 5 reasons. All right, number one, it is hard to believe that any bookie would accept $4.5 million in debt, let you run up a tab when you make $300,000 a year. That's the reports from Major League Baseball about how much Ippei Matsuhara made as a translator for Shohei Ohtani. $300,000 to $500,000 a year. Now, not many bookies would say, $4.5 million, I know you're good for it. Unless they know somehow Ohtani is good for it. What that means is you would think the bookmaker either thought Ohtani was in on the bets or Ohtani was such good friends with Ippei that he would cover the bets, both of which could be a violation. Obviously, betting would be a violation. Covering someone else's bets could also be a federal crime. But it's hard to believe the bookie would simply say, I know the translator is good for $4.5 million at the salary of $300,000. Number two, how long would your friend be able to steal money from you? How much money could your friend steal from you and go totally unnoticed? Now, I know professional athletes have a lot of money, and many of them are irresponsible in how they manage their finances. But this reportedly was going out in $500,000 chunks. Now, how many $500,000 chunks would fly under the radar of your accountant? Was Ippei Ohtani's accountant? Was he his manager? He wasn't his agent. So he and only he, even if Ohtani's irresponsible, he and only he had knowledge of Ohtani's finances? Only he could see $4.5 million going out in $500,000 increments over time. I don't care who your buddy is. And honestly, the fact that Ohtani's rich would increase the levels of insurance and suspicion and number of people involved in overseeing his business than you or me being simply irresponsible and letting somebody have access to our bank account, which brings us to number 3. How does Ippei Matsuhara have unfettered access to Ohtani's bank accounts? Like, what kind of power attorney do you have to give to someone for them to be wiring money directly from your account without your approval over and over again? The bank wouldn't ever go, this is weird. This raises a red flag. And Ohtani's only path to the English world is through Ippei Matsuhara? Which brings me to number 4. the relationship these guys had up until the accusation of massive theft. There was a video floating around last week of the two, Ippei Matsuhara, the translator, and Shohei Ohtani in a dugout in Korea as the Dodgers traveled to Korea, yucking it up, laughing. 2 hours before Ohtani accuses him of massive theft. Now, here's how the story goes. The story goes that Ohtani had no idea what was going on. None. Until a team meeting, shortly after that video we saw, where Ippei announces to everyone in the Dodgers organization and Ohtani for the first time that he has been taking money from Ohtani. And Ohtani, because he doesn't understand English, is only picking up bits and pieces of this story in this team meeting and walks out with Ippei and continues to discuss it. And then has a private meeting where he begins to understand the full extent of what's going on. That's what we're led to believe, that there were no discussions. Now, prior to this, ESPN was doing a story and talking to Ippei Matsuhara. And that news never got back to Ohtani. Nothing ever made its way back to Ohtani until he's sitting there with Mookie Betts in the locker going, what's he talking about? What's my translator saying? What's he saying? He's saying he stole from me? That doesn't make any bit of sense whatsoever. That is just a hard pill to swallow. Bring you next to, as part of this nature of the relationship, apparently the way the story goes is CAA, Ohtani's agency, as well as everybody else in the Ohtani orbit. Now, when you're this big a star, there's a lot of people in your orbit. Nobody had access to this information, that this story was coming, and to understand what was going on, or to monitor Ohtani's bank accounts, than Ippei. The guy who was under suspicion, who would be eventually accused of massive theft, was the sole conduit that everybody was talking to. Okay, and by the way, let me lay in number 5 here, and that's the changing story that makes this all hard to believe, a tough pill to swallow. The original story is that, as said by the translator, that I was gambling, not Ohtani. Ohtani's my boy. He was covering my debts. That's the story that Ippei told. Then immediately after he tells it, by the way, at this point, it's out. This is after the team meeting. After that, immediately after that, Ohtani's camp goes, not true, not true. Lawyers were hired. Lawyers go, not true. Massive theft. Because they realized, you would think immediately, whoa, it's a rule violation for Ohtani to be covering even his friends' debts, much less if he was the one doing the gambling. So now we got to get completely absolved of this. We got to totally distance from the whole situation. And Ippei needs to take the fall. We've got to accuse massive theft. Now, let me just ask you this really quickly. From that point forward, still all communication is happening through Ippei. CAA, Ohtani camp, Ohtani attorneys. At that point, still as they're trying to coordinate the story with Ippei. And let me ask you a question. Would you continue to funnel all communication through a guy that you suspected of massive theft, or a guy who was willingly taking the fall? Like, if everyone is communicating through the translator, continuing to, after this comes to light, for a while, for a period of time, if everyone is continuing to communicate exclusively through the translator, would that signify trust or distrust? You wouldn't trust your sole channel of communication to be a guy you suspected of massive theft, but you would trust to have your sole method of communication go through a guy who's on the team and taken the fall. I don't know if Ohtani was gambling. I don't know if Ohtani was covering gambling debts for his translator. But I know that nothing about Ohtani's case adds up. That's 5 massive holes in the story that point suspicion to Shohei Ohtani. Now that leads us to this. Does anybody care? Does anybody care if he was covering debts for his buddy? I think the answer is honestly no. Does anybody care if he was gambling? Honestly, I think the answer is no. Everybody gambles. Sports is rife with gambling. ESPN's running ads on gambling. DraftKings is everywhere. FanDuel at the bottom of your screen. Nobody cares. They said they were gambling on soccer, NBA. Nobody cares. The only answer to where anyone cares is whether or not Ohtani was betting on baseball. If Ohtani, for the record, was simply paying off Matsuhara's debt, that would be a violation, although in a gray area, of Major League Baseball's Rule 21. And if a federal investigation into illegal bets placed, league precedent suggests even then he would receive only a fine. There's precedent for that. Jared Cossert of the Miami Marlins, a pitcher in 2015, an investigation determined he was placing illegal sports bet. But he did not bet on baseball. Jared Cossert of the Marlins was fined. So even if he was betting Ohtani, but on different sports, soccer, a fine. But if he was betting on baseball, this is when we all begin to care. If he bets on a game, this is according to The Athletic, in which he was not involved, bets on baseball, he's not in the game. Year-long ban. Best player in baseball, potentially. Year-long ban from MLB. If he bet on a game in which he was involved, permanent ban. Lifetime ban from MLB. Ohtani's story doesn't add up, and I give you the 5 reasons. We care if he bet on baseball. It's massive if he bet on a game that he was involved in Major League Baseball.